Tonight, we are gathered together virtually. Some of us here on Zoom, some of us through the call-in, some of us will be listening to the recording. And we are here in memory of a beloved teacher, Miss Bernson, Devorah Leah Bas Chaim Yael. And I had Miss Bernson myself when I was in 10th grade. And then, of course, interacted with her in my work in Beis Rivka. And I found it so meaningful how Miss Bernson took such an interest, specifically in the Embrace magazine, and giving me such specific feedback, writing paper letters to me. And that was actually part of what, Miss Bernson stood for. She upheld her high standards. She did not do the internet quick email, paper letter mailed. And when I think of Miss Bernson, and we're going to hear more from her, more about her tonight from colleagues and alumni, I think of her unwavering commitment to halacha, to Torah, to whatever it is that Torah wants from us in the highest standards, from tznius to davening. So from, so sincere, so real. And it's an honor to spend time together tonight to reflect on what we can learn from her, on how much we gained from her, and may her neshama have an aliyah. So our first speaker for tonight is Mrs. Shurpin, a colleague, also a beloved teacher, my teacher as well in 10th grade. Go ahead, Ms.
The first thing, I'm going to agree with you. If she will hear that we're talking about her, I don't think she will be that happy. And we're doing it through internet. She will also disapprove. On the other hand, she knew that that's what we do and that's how we communicate. So I think she accepted us the way we are. But I can see her, oh, stop talking about me. And talking about talking, this is one thing that happened. It took me I would say, a few years to be brave enough to tell her that I only understood half of what she was saying, because I have a problem with people who talk fast. So I had to always ask her, please slow down. But it took me quite a while to be able to just say, I don't know what you just said. It was a thing that went on for quite a while until I was brave enough. Okay, so I'm going to try to describe some things about her and the best of my abilities. Okay, I'm probably going to just touch very little of what she really was. The one thing is that she was very tznius. So you could see that she was doing what is supposed to be done. So she wanted to give the impression and that's how a Jewish person has to dress. She was always very concerned about tznius, very concerned about halacha. She was so honest that if ever happened that I brought her something or whatever, she had to pay to the penny. She would always tell me, I'm not allowed to give you extra. I'm not allowed to give you less. She had to know the exact amount, how it was. So I learned from her that, I cannot tell her around $2. No, she had to know exactly with the extra penny what it was. On Rosh Chodesh, she will always come dressed a little bit different because she always said you have to be covered. It's Rosh Chodesh. So she made sure that she dressed more, a little bit, probably not completely Shabbosic, but as close to it. And she told everybody, it's Rosh Chodesh. We have to do something special for Rosh Chodesh. And you could just learn to know how to behave just by looking at her on her frumkeit. So you always knew that there's something more that I'm going to learn from her. She also was very into the people should respect all the Talmidim Chachamim, from anywhere. And if a speaker came and she was like very concerned, she wanted the kids to give the right amount of respect to anybody who deserves it. And this is something that she was very emphatic about. She wanted people to be also careful about their kashrus, and she herself was very careful about the kashrus, what she ate, what she drank. And you learned, again, from the way she behaved a lot more than just her subject. I found that she spent tons of time on the work, correcting what the students were doing. And she spent so much time after school teaching and mentoring kids that I don't think anybody understood the amount of time that she put. It will be like, somebody else would have made a ton, tutoring or whatever, charging for the time. She would have made double her salary, but she didn't. She didn't tell anybody how much time she put in there. And she really spent a lot of times per student, whoever needed the help. I'm not sure that all the girls at that time, when they had to redo the work, were so happy. Why is she picking on this? Or why should... But I think years later, they learned to appreciate it. I mean, she was just giving herself more work. I will look at her, why are you working so hard? And no, she wanted the girls to do the things the right way. Also, another thing about doing things the right way, you could see she always brought her box of tissues to class, so the girls didn't have to go out, especially if it was tests. She made cookies for tests and they got extra credit. She made cookies even for my students. When I was giving the Regents lab for my students, the laboratory part, she always wanted to help me, but she will come and she will carry this in the subway, whichever way she came, bags of cookies for my students. So when they come to the test, they shouldn't feel hungry. They should be able to function better. So she will put a whole spread out the room next to the room where we were giving the test. And these were my students. And she will always give me a honey cake for Rosh Hashanah. I think I wasn't allowed to tell that to anybody, but she did it. And she brought, to me and a couple of other people. And the other, I find that, the way she spoke, people paid attention. It was, you couldn't fall asleep when she spoke. You knew that you have to pay attention. And you also knew that she had a whole list of people that she kept who needs to say Tehillim, for who needs Tehillim. So that's the only part that I feel like, I would have liked to be able to have said Tehillim to her, for her, if I knew she wasn't well. But she didn't want to cause anybody the pain of knowing how sick she was. So I understood that. But she had a list and she kept track. She will ask me, this person still needs Tehillim? Is this person getting better? She really wanted, she meant it. She spent the time, she got together with other people, and she said her Tehillim for whoever needed. The other thing that I remember that she used to keep us in, like, laughing away, at the end of the year, she would give each of us, or not each of us, her students and the teachers, something called unquotable quotes, because she was very observant. And during the year, she will write down something funny that somebody said, something cute, something that will make us laugh. So instead of doing unquotable quotes, I want to quote some girls that we asked permission in one of the class chats that they said when they wrote about her when they found out that she was nifter and they were doing this. So I'm reading. I don't have names of the girls, and I'm not going to say it, but I'm just going to read some of the girls. This person said, one time, basically, Miss Bernson was very sick. She didn't feel well, so she missed school. So she came on Monday and apologized for, no, she didn't come on Monday. So she came Tuesday and Wednesday and apologizing all the time for being sick. And then she was telling us how miserable, sick she was feeling, that on Friday night, she just physically couldn't get herself out of bed and kept telling to herself, Debbie, Friday night is the Raisa. Go make Kiddush. She was keeping on yelling at her own self to do. Another girl sent a voicemail, so she just saying how she explained to the class that Friday night is the Raisa, and everybody looked at her blank, and she said, "Why, you don't know the halacha?" And she wanted them to know more halacha. Another person is saying so many memories. She was super sharp and not shy to speak her mind out. I respected her because I felt that she was one of the few teachers who guaranteed that hard work will pay off in becoming a better writer. I remember her teaching how to sing the rhythm in poems and try to use that technique in the endless children's rhyming books that I read now to my kids. This is another person. Almost every time I write something, almost every time I write, something she taught comes to my mind. This is another student. I was just thinking about her the other day because my daughter was reviewing for her grammar test, and she said a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. And I am thinking, no, nope. A noun is a word that describes a person, place, think, or idea. She was repeating what Miss Bernson taught her. Another girl wrote, I loved her classes. Ditto to the is are. And who could forget about the ubiquitous Masha Flosha? Then she said, another girl is saying, I remember her being the first English teacher to actually give real and concrete feedback on work. She pushed me to grow as a writer because of this. A funny one I remember is her saying not to start an explanation with, I think that, because if you're writing, it's obvious that you're thinking. Parenthesis, hopefully. Another girl says, yes, and she changed her answering machine to what we were doing in school. Like, I can't come to the phone right now, because I am marking English tests. And the last one I'm going to say is another girl wrote, I also remember she gave us +5 on a test if we sent her a picture with our picture of ourselves before a PTA so that she could recognize it when the parents came. And well, a few girls got +5 if the parents didn't come, because she wasn't in the mood to talking to so many parents. She kind of was uncomfortable talking to them. I just was in there. In general, we really had a lot to learn just by having her presence around us. There were all sorts of things that we could learn how to be. And I think a lot of people learn how we are supposed to be presented, how to present ourselves, and what kind of impression we should be giving to the world as Jewish women. And that's basically, I can say I really miss her. And I wish to should give her an aliyah and her neshama, Borelea. Okay, everybody should only hear good news from everybody.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Mrs. Shurpin. You definitely express what a lot of us feel. We definitely, in our grade chat also, we didn't peek at the one that you read, but even in my grade chat, very similar things, remembering both how entertaining, how sharp. I remember my paper also was crossed off, full of red marks, but I learned so much from her. So thank you so much, Mrs. Shurpin. Our next speaker is Ms. Yocheved Gasinski, who's also a teacher.
And was also her student. I was very privileged to also be her student. And by the way, Mrs. Shurpin, I just have to jump in here with the Masha Flusha. Aside for being, again, a manifestation of Miss Bernson's amazing, wonderful, bubbly personality, she always used names in her worksheets that were names that were not they were very unusual names, so that no one should ever feel uncomfortable. So we got Masha Flushas and other such names showing up on all her worksheets. I remember my year, she actually had to go amend all her worksheets because we actually had one of my classmates was Gisa. I don't know if she's on here now, but she'll definitely remember how she went and mended all the worksheets so that it should not at all be uncomfortable for anybody ever. One thing I wanted to mention is that we're all here together talking about Miss Bernson. But before we even get there, I just wanted to mention that in general, all of the chiyuvim of avelos, all the halachas of avelos are all the din halachas of avelos, including Shloshim, which marks the 30th day, which for any relative besides a parent is the end of avelos, essentially, official avelos. Really, this is all of these halachas, these are all for the benefit of the avel, not for the benefit of the niftar. It's all for the benefit of a person who is still physically here and still physically able to feel the physical pain, the physical torment of this world, and also able to feel the comfort that is manifested in all those physical expressions of mourning. So when you think about Miss Bernson and us tonight, we're here to reflect and remember, and Miss Bernson was a very humble person. I mean, when she was here with us alive, she would never have signed up for an evening just singing her praises. But what is this meaningful? In what way is this meaningful for her tonight? Well, the answer is what the Rebbe would mention to many people in many letters of condolences. And also in the Sikha that he said, Gimel Shvat, right before Yud Shvat, about the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe speaks there about how the soul of the departed is already in a better place, is already transcended and above, transcending everything that we're dealing with here in this physical world. So what does the soul really want at this point? The soul still has one desire that is very much attached to the physical world, and that is to make a dira b'tachtainim, to do Torah and to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, and to do Hashem's ratzon in this world. But the soul is unable to, because he's no longer connected to the body. And so what the Rebbe says in that Sikha, and he also says it in a number of letters, including to Mrs. Chana Sharstein, Alaa Shalom, that the soul's not looking for crying. The soul's looking for somebody to come and sign up to be its physical conduit so it can fulfill its deepest desire of serving Hashem in this physical world. So when we sit together tonight, and by the way, I always remember that Sikha just because it was said on Gimel Shvat in Tafshin and Beis, and it's the Sikha where the Rebbe talks about how when Moshe had to go to Parai and deliver Hashem's message to Parai, he told Hashem, listen, I can't speak. And Hashem tells Moshe, go with Aaron, Aaron will be your mouth. And so the Rebbe concludes that with Yud Shvat coming up, we have to be the Frierdiker Rebbe's mouth, and we therefore have to be the mouth and the foot and the hand of the departed person's soul so that they can fulfill Torah mitzvahs, which is what they want most right now in this physical world. So we have to sign up for that. And by the end of it, and I always remember that just because that day was my grandfather's Shloshim, and his name is Moshe Aaron. So that message always stuck with me. So when we share these stories tonight, it's to, of course, talk about the incredible person Miss Bernson was, but mostly is to see how she lived and to take something upon ourselves so that we can continue living for her, so that her neshama can continue finding expression in Torah mitzvahs through us in this world. So a number of things that I want to share that I remember from Ms. Bernson, because as I mentioned, I did have the great privilege, the great success of being her student, but also her colleague. And as a student, I remember what everybody has already mentioned and what Ms. Shurpin got from all the other students. And what all the chats are currently filled with is her incredible personality, her incredible energy, her cookies, her care, her concern. But seeing that just from the angle of the student, and then also again from the angle of the colleague is incredible. I mean, she would stay after school to do prep sessions for students who she thought needed a little extra help doing well on her quizzes she used to give. I'm sure everybody remembers the grammar quizzes and the helping verbs quizzes and the comma quizzes and the figurative language quizzes, all her quizzes that she was making sure everybody is on top of their game with. If she saw students who were not doing so well, she wanted them to do well. And so she was willing to stay after school and do these tutoring sessions. And I know Mrs. Lane approached her one time and said, Miss Bernson, what are your rates? You know, like, what would you like for that? And she said, no, Mrs. Lane, I am an educator And these are my students, and I want them to do well, and I want them to feel good about it. And that's why I'm doing this. I'm not thinking about the money. I haven't thought about the money. I'm not asking for the money. I'm doing it. And as a teacher, you know, as a student, you don't necessarily always realize what that means. But as a teacher on a teacher's salary, you suddenly start appreciating that on a whole new level. And the reason she did that is because, as she said, she is an educator. But I'd like to add, and this is kind of echoing what Mrs. Shurpin already said, is that for me, if I had to summarize Ms. Bernson in a word or two, I would say it's honesty and integrity, because everything in her life was so real and so full of honesty. And when she took on a job and she said that she's an educator, she meant it till the last drop. And she was a teacher who boosted everybody. Like, she understood that teaching is the knowledge, but teaching is also what you do for the students and how you boost your students. So she would work, you know, put whatever it takes into working to help students do well. And the students who are doing well, who sometimes people forget that they're there because they're the quiet ones, or they're just doing what they're supposed to and making it. She always knew how to put in a word, a good compliment in the, you know, most exquisitely worded English that made you really feel good about yourself, really feel like here's somebody who notices me, who's appreciating me, who's appreciating my ability, who's appreciating my talent. And I saw that both as her student and then also as her colleague. And one story I wanted to share that most people probably don't know, because I don't know that she's ever shared it. And the only reason I know it is because I had a personal conversation with this woman, thanks to Miss Bernson. Miss Bernson had a student when Miss Bernson taught 8th grade in Beis Yaakov. This is not a Chabad woman, but this is a woman who went on to be a principal of a very prestigious school, a principal of a very prestigious seminary, a board member of a very important shul, and a very influential, powerful woman, not in the Chabad crowd. And when I was speaking to her and we were talking about our common, you know, our mutual connections, our mutual acquaintances, we were talking about Miss Bernson. And she told me an incredible story. She told me that when she was starting out her career and she was about to become principal, she had told the board that she has a degree in English. And the thing is that she almost had a degree in English, a degree, like a master's in English. She didn't quite have it. She was a few days away from getting it. Now, unfortunately, she had to submit a thesis in order to, you know, graduate. And unfortunately for her, her supervising professor was both a drunk and an anti-Semite. And at the last minute, he knew exactly what he was doing, but at the last minute, he woke up in his stupor and he sends her an email with all of the problems with her paper and how she needs to basically revamp the entire thing and pretty much do it overnight. And she really could not afford to have this drag for another semester because school year starting, and she had already promised the board she's coming in with her degree. So she really cannot have this happen to her. So she called up Miss Bernson, and Miss Bernson sat up with her an entire night and fixed her paper with her. And this was someone who she knew because she taught her in 8th grade. That's who Miss Bernson was. What exactly did Miss Bernson get out of this, other than the fact that she stayed true to who she was? A teacher, an educator, someone who cares for you now and cares for you forever, and is looking to see the talent and see the ability and bolster it no matter where you are, no matter where you are in life, and no matter how old you are, and where you are even in relation to her. I remember when I first came to teach, I was at the time the youngest person in the teacher's room. I was certainly the youngest person in the ELA department for a number of years, I think. And it's only natural that when a very young person walks in, there is some skepticism around that. All I could say is that Miss Bernson took very quick to get to know me. And very quickly, she ascertained what my strengths were, and immediately made me feel welcome, and immediately made me feel like I was on equal footing and gave me equal respect. And that is something that is because, coming back to this theme, that she is truly a person of integrity and honesty. And it didn't matter. She was always searching for the truth. She was always willing to stand for the truth, even if it was uncomfortable, even if it would have been natural to do otherwise, even if that is kind of the natural thing to do that was never her. And because of that, when she did give a compliment or when she did give an opinion, you knew it was coming from a place of complete honesty. And she was always the person I would love to go to for an opinion for that very reason. And I remember one time, and there was zero ego involved in any of this. It was just because she stood for the truth. There was one time she was teaching a class, and she had like a little interaction with the girls where she said something about a specific definition of a word, and the girl said that they had heard otherwise. So she came down to my classroom and she knocked on the door. She said, "Can I ask you a quick question?" And she said, "What do you think about this?" Because the girls are telling me they had heard otherwise, and if that's true, I'm gonna go tell them that they're right. And so we had a little discussion, and that's what ended up happening. I ended up saying, "No, I think that actually what they're saying is correct." And with zero hesitation, she went right back to her room and told them that was correct, what you girls said. No hesitation on her part, because it was never about her. Ever. It was never about her. It was always about the truth. It was always about the education. It was always about raising these people up and giving them the guidance and the path to be everything that they could be, with zero ego on her part. And the fact that she came to me, who I was her former student, just underscores this very point, which is no matter what the source is, if she feels like this is a source and here is an ability and here is the truth, then that is something she would be willing to go for and stand behind. And one other thing, that I wanted to mention, I was reading today's Hayam Yam, and it just struck me that it's so appropriate that this is the Hayam of her Shloshim, because it says in today's Hayam Yam, Da Selekei Avicha v'avdeu b'lev shalem. Know the God of your father and serve him wholeheartedly. And what the Hayam Yam is explaining is that the juxtaposition of these two phrases, like why do we have know that Hashem is your father and serve him right next to each other? Because the test of your knowledge is in your action. And Miss Bernson was someone who was always looking for the truth, always looking for what does it say? What does halacha say? What is the truth? Why did she want to know this? Because she wanted to act on it. It wasn't theory. It wasn't nice words. It was action for her. And everybody who you speak to, and Mrs. Shurpin and Mrs. Blau, both spoke about how careful she was in Inyanim of halacha, how careful she was in everything, how she always wanted to know the best way to do it. If there was ever a question, if there was ever a shiloh, she was always the one asking. Another thing I wanted you to know is that she was actually a big Talmidei Chachama. She was actually very erudite when it comes to Torah in general. She would always attend shiurim in her own right, but also in school. We do every week, we do shiurim in the teacher's room. She would always attend. She would always listen. She always enjoyed it. It was a big part of her life. And one time when she gave a shiur herself in the teacher's room, you can tell this is coming from a person who really has a lot of knowledge. Torah was absolutely her passion. She must have known endless amounts of English literature, and she must have read endless amounts of literature as well, even though it was difficult for her, because she once told me that she had dyslexia and she overcame it. And yet she, none of this was holding her back. And look what she managed to achieve, because at the end of the day, she always saw her goal. She saw the truth in the goal, and she just worked towards it no matter what. And even though she was an English teacher, and there was obviously passion there, but her ultimate passion at the end of the day was Torah. And Miss Bernson, for anybody who remembers, was a person who was always dapper, always chipper, always full of life and energy, more energy than her teenage students. But the one time where I really saw her so full of life and so full of excitement was the day after the Siyam Hashas in MetLife Stadium. So they do the Siyam Hashas every couple of years in the MetLife Stadium. And that year she found out that they were opening one small section for women. The fact that she found out even about this and that she attended, and then she came back, and I can't even explain, her face was beaming. I have never seen her so happy in her life. She was shining, like she was on high, like a teenager on the greatest high, because she was so youthful and this was her passion. So one thing I want to say is to come back to what we're really doing tonight is we're talking about her so that we can be her hand, and we can be her foot, and we can be her mind, and we can be her mouth. So I teach 12th grade English. And my students are her students. She was my teacher, and therefore all my students are her students. So what I'm going to do in my class, in her memory is, and to be her mouth and her mind and her foot and her soul, is to, and sorry, not her soul, to be the conduit for her soul, is that every Thursday we're going to have a different girl say Advar Torah, which is something I know she would love. She would love to be there, and I know she'll be there spiritually. So we're going to have a girl say Advar Torah every Thursday, and we'll have someone type it up and send it out to all the students, and maybe even we'll find a way to send it out to alumni as well. So leaving today, if there's something you can take away from her, a way to be more careful in halacha, a way to be honest in something in your life, a way to look at the other person and try to boost them, and try to acknowledge what you see in the other person entirely selflessly, then this is what her neshama desires right now. So it's an absolute privilege to be able to say that she taught me, and that I was her colleague, and we will continue her legacy.
So what's her
Thank you.
name? What's her
Thank
name?
you. Thank you, Miss Kaczynski. That was beautiful. I had no idea that Miss Bernson was dyslexic. That was totally new to me. I'm in shock and even more inspired and uplifted. I also want to say that I feel terrible. I did not realize, usually my account, this account allows for 500 people, and for whatever reason right now it's maxed at 100. I've been getting lots of messages that people are trying to get on and they can't. So I just want to, if you're on, please let anyone know if they're messaging you. We will send out a recording. And it's so beautiful to see how many people are trying to get on. It seems like hundreds, and I'm sorry that we have this capacity and this limit, and we're all learning so much. So hopefully this will continue to have a ripple effect with the recording and with all of us internalizing, and taking something in for ourselves. Our last speaker is Shalom Schava Halem, a former student.
Hi, I'm Shalom Chava. I graduated basically in 2018, and Ms. Bernson taught me in 2015, 2016. And I remember when she taught us, she was just always so alive. I know this was said before, and I think a lot of things I'm going to say are going to sound repetitive, but I think that just shows truth when it's consistent among a few people. Every single day, every single lesson, she was just there. She was alive. She was present. Her energy was like so, like, you could feel it, and I never felt like a low energy going into or coming out of her class. I really enjoyed every moment being in her class. She made us think, she made us laugh. She was critical, but it was always constructive, and I remember loving her feedback, and I remember loving the discussions we had in class because they were always so stimulating and so interesting. And I remember like looking forward to her classes. And like looking forward to hearing what she had to say, and hearing about like what new thing we're going to learn today. It was never a typical class. It was never a boring lecture. It was always engaging. It was always just like there and interesting. And I remember for her brother's yard site, she once brought us like a printout from a sefer to learn in class. And the message that she sent us very strongly then was that, like, we have a curriculum to learn, we have work to do, and we will get to that, and we did. But this was what was important in life. For Elias Neshama, you learn Torah. And I love Ms. Kaczynski's idea of sharing Dvar Torah. I think that's so special. So like what's important in life is Torah, it's Hashem, it's like keeping in line and learning with all of that. And that like really struck me. And I think that's amazing as an English teacher that she was able to impart that message. Also, I know this was mentioned before also with like her homemade treats that she brought. I remember for one midterm, she brought these like really well-made, intricate homemade ice cream cookies, and they were so delicious. And it just showed that she put a lot of time and effort and energy into the work that she did and into the things she did. And really that lesson that I took from that is that there's a lot of times that we could get away with the bare minimum. And a lot of times it's okay to do the bare minimum. But I never felt in any time I was in Miss Bernson's class, anytime I was her student, anytime I interacted with her afterward, that she put in the bare minimum. I've always felt that she went above and beyond and never felt like there was a person, detail, lesson, anything that was too insignificant to care about. And I really just from her, I learned integrity. I learned like really what's important in life. I learned how to think critically. And I learned how to learn in an enjoyable environment, one that I like appreciated, like spending my time in, and also really just to put my all into everything I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, when you hear the same theme from multiple people, you know this is real. This is who the person was. One thing that I also wait, Shalom Chava, were you done or are you gonna continue?
Yeah, I was finished. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for your words. One thing that I also heard from a lot of teachers and former students was Miss Bernson's passion for mincha. She made sure her students at the mincha bell were going to daven mincha. And some of the teachers were even talking about it, and therefore I want to encourage and suggest mincha is a very, very hard tefillah to say because it's the middle of the day, you're in the middle of, you know, especially in the winter when it's early. But we just wanted to suggest if anybody would want to make a hachlata to daven mincha for any amount of time, whether it's one day, a month, anything, you know, in memory and in honor of Miss Bernson, it would it would be very meaningful, and she would definitely be proud. One of the teachers even told me that she tried to daven mincha. She would stand on Dushman Esrei in front of the door, so the girls couldn't just leave. Like she was there, she was blocking them leaving, so they may as well open up the siddur and daven mincha. So I want to end on that note of thanking everyone who came on and, you know, seeing how much Miss Bernson impacted all of us and how much we all will try in our own little way to make sure that like Ms. Kaczynski said so articulate, you know, and so clearly that the lessons that she taught us will live on through us, that each of us that are here, that we should each take upon ourselves something we learned from her to keep her chayas alive, her energy, her neshama, and to continue. You know, a lot of us felt and feel a sense of like, you know, we're part of her family. We're her family, you know. B'Srifka, we were her life. She spent hours and hours and gave us her phone number to call. And it's with that sense of achrayus that we have this v'chayitena libay to make a hachlata, to do something in her honor, in her memory, whether you're in school, you're out of school, wherever you are, that her neshama should have an aliyah. So thank you everyone for, somebody's asking for her name. We mentioned in the beginning. I will just go back and repeat it. It was Devora Leah Bas. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Devora Leah Bas Chaim Yel. That her neshama should have an aliyah, and all the lessons that she gave us should live through us, etc. So thank you everybody for joining, and we will be sharing the recording for those that missed it.